Hello there, welcome to another edition of the Open Governance Initiative, the OGI. On this program, we talk about the National Development Plan 2018-2021, and of course, taking stock of the programs and plans undertaken by the different ministries in consolidating the gains as registered in this plan. My name is Fatuli Kamiloshi, your host for this program. And today on the show, our guest is the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Tourism and Culture. The Permanent Secretary is accompanied by 3 Order Director Generals from 3 different institutions working directly with the same ministry. The first Director General to accompany the Permanent Secretary, who is Kodo L. Jabang, is going to be the Director General from the Gambia Tourism Board, Mr. Abubakar S. Kamara. Following that will be the Director General of the National Center for Arts and Culture, Mr. Hassum Sise, and then the Director General of the Gambia Tourism and Hospitality Institute, Mr. Daouda Nyang. Altogether, the guests will help us expand the conversation right here on the OGI. Don't forget we're streaming live on our social media platforms. And as well, keep following just so you are keeping track of what exactly is happening on this program as well. When we come back from this break, the program begins proper. Stay with us. Welcome back to the OGI. My name is Fatuli Kamiloshi, and our guests are already seated, ready to expand the conversation. And we, of course, have the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Tourism and Culture, Madam Kodo L. Jabang Senghor. And with her right now on this platform is the Director General of the Gambia Tourism Board, Mr. Abubakar S. Kamara. P.S., you're welcome to the OGI. Director General, you're also welcome. Of course, I'm so glad to have you on the show, P.S. And I first of all like you to start off with telling us exactly what you do at the ministry and how you're working with your different partners in realizing your goals.
Thank you very much. Good evening, viewers. The Ministry of Tourism and Culture basically spearheads the implementation of the policy of government in terms of tourism aspirations and goals that the government of the Gambia wishes to achieve. So basically, in assisting government implement that policy, we have the Gambia Tourism Board that is under the ministry, which basically operationalizes that implementation of the policy that the government sets for tourism development. Under culture, we have the National Center for Arts and Culture, which basically implements also the cultural aspirations that the government has from the ministry. The policy that we have is then cascaded down to these 2 institutions for implementation and operationalization of those policies. We have the Gambia Tourism and Hospitality Institute, which is also a very important institution under us, because it basically ensures that the personnel that are employed within the tourism sector are very well capacitized in terms of training, in terms of exposure, in terms of being very much ready to compete internationally as far as the tourism sector human resource development component is concerned.
And how's your coordination with all these different departments going?
It's excellent. I mean, we have very much committed Director Generals who also have very committed staff under them, who are very much aware of what the national development aspirations are. And we, as often as possible, meet at the ministry level to ensure that the national development plan strategies and work plans that we set out for these institutions are actually on track in terms of achievement. So they are very much committed, as I said. And at the ministry also, we have very committed staff who are also assisting myself, the Permanent Secretary, to ensure that these institutions that are under us are in line with the required sort of implementation ideas and and needs of the National Development Plan.
Very well. Now, talking about the National Development Plan, it has quite ambitious goals for this ministry, to be specific. Yeah. And one of them is to increase tourist arrivals from about 155,000 in 2016 to over 300,000 in 2020. Tell us, has that been met?
We were on track in meeting this, and I think that was very much reflected in the annual progress report.
How has it been reflected in the annual report?
You would see that the first progress report that was registered by the Ministry of Finance clearly indicated that we were on track in terms of implementation of the National Development Plan aspirations. But unfortunately, when COVID hit, COVID-19 had actually brought the sector to a standstill. And in terms of arrivals, we were expecting to at least register over 100,000 arrivals for 2020.
100,000?
Over 100,000, close to 130,000.
So, Director, let me just come to you and just kind of tell us briefly, what is our biggest selling product in this industry in the Gambia here?
Well, thank you very much for that very important question. Our biggest selling product is the people of the Gambia. I mean, if you look at our selling point is Smiling Coast of the Gambia. That translates to the people, our culture. I mean, that is one of the greatest selling products. However, we do have a lot of people that are coming for sun, sea, and sand, which is leisure tourism.
Has it been enough to attract more tourists over the years?
Certainly, especially the cultural part. But however, we are still working on ways and means of coming in with other products in terms of our nature parks, our historic and cultural heritage sites. These are things that will enhance the product.
You know, that being said, aside the sun, land, sea, and the obvious, you know, the aim is to decentralize, really, tourism products across all regions, like you mentioned, including the rural areas especially. Now, most of the touristic sites, especially in these areas, the UNESCO inscribed, are currently not in the best shape. Let me just shift to you, PS, to talk to us about the restoration process. How is that going and the empowerment of these communities, because they are the custodians of their tradition and culture as well?
That's right. I think what the NDP has done with the coming of this new government is to really give culture that prominence and importance. The cultural sector has for a very long time been neglected, and it has not had that much funding in terms of what it requires to actually perform effectively, efficiently, as we may put it. So what His Excellency President Adam Barrow's government did was to ensure that the budgetary support that was given to the ministry to transfer it to the National Center for Arts and Culture was increased to a point that the National Center for Arts and Culture now, aside of the subvention that they had usually been receiving in the past, on an annual basis will have a development budget that they would use to ensure that they operate these heritage sites.
Very well. And of course, NCAC will join us shortly to further dilate on this as well and just tell us what they think of the steps taken so far. But last time I discussed with another PS about the issue of packaging our tourism product in terms of meeting just worldwide standards. Where are we in terms of packaging?
I think, to be quite honest, we have done a lot with the little we have, because packaging, as you are referring to, requires a lot of financial resources. And as a sector, unfortunately, in the past, we have not really been given much attention in terms of finances to ensure that we also, as a country, compete with destinations.
So you've not been given enough in terms of finances. Who has not given enough? You mean in terms of the budgetary allocation?
Budgetary allocation for the
the sector.
Institutions that are under us. That is one. And secondly, marketing. Marketing a destination is not.
So tourism is supposed to generate much needed income. Is that not happening for this case? Or you were trying to explain that if the resources are not invested enough, you cannot generate the much needed income?
There's a limit to what you generate as a sector. In the case of Gambia Tourism Board, they only generate revenues from arrivals. And obviously with COVID-19 pandemic, arrivals are literally zero. So they're not generating any revenue when it comes to arrivals.
Let me just shift.
Secondly, there's the issue also of operational licenses. They generate revenue from. Operational licenses that they collect from hotels. And if hotels aren't operational, there is no way you would collect revenue from hotels who literally have zero financial revenue also coming into their coffers. So yes, it is both in terms of investment in marketing and packaging the destination. It requires a lot of resources. And if you look across the world, what other destinations are doing, they're ensuring that their governments are giving them the needed budget to actually fulfill those needs and aspirations.
Very well. Let me just shift to the director here, because what you're saying has to do with now, exactly what we're facing now. But this might be, an ongoing thing and has been existing for quite a long time already. What would you say are some of the quality or standard deficiencies, and what exactly is going wrong in terms of how we can improve that formation?
No, of course, standards go with funding, a lot of investment in the facilities. And if you look at it now, with this advent of this government, a new hotel classification was validated, and we hope that if hotels and tourism establishment adhere to those standards, and the standard of generally the standards of the facilities would be high. However, because of this advent of COVID, the hotels could not have a lot of revenue. They could not have money to reinvest also to meet that standard. It is very difficult for them.
So aside the COVID-19, put aside, let's say the COVID-19 was not there before. Of course, the classification came about when the new minister came in the new government. And it is hoped that with that, of course, they will meet up the required standards. Is that actually enough to make sure that this gap is bridged? Or there are other areas that you're also looking at? In terms of that classification, in fact, are hotels really adhering to this?
Certainly. I mean, when this hotel classification document was validated, hotels picked it up and they were using it and run with it. And they were actually adapting. And people even who don't want to invest in hotels, etc., will come to get the document first to look at it and see what star category they want to build. So definitely they embrace it and they were using it.
What has been your stance as the GT board?
Well, we keep encouraging them, and also the ministry has been supportive. You look at it, that every year we go with your GRTS team. Some of your people, I recognize them. We go around the whole country with the minister and all the other satellite institutions under the Ministry of Tourism and Culture to look at the standards of these facilities countrywide. I mean, that alone is very helpful it's very encouraging, and that has even encouraged a lot of other Gambians to even invest in upcountry. Apart from that as well, the duty board at our level had an inspection team that inspect facilities quarterly, twice on a quarterly basis. So that is also an addition. And there are also inspection criteria, there are inspection standards that they use, which also facilities are aware of, and they use it. That is also very helpful. And the fact that also the stakeholders are very cooperative, I think that is very good.
Would you say the sector is pretty much very organized?
Sure.
In the way it's coordinating
its
activities and packaging its product to attract more tourists, diverse tourists from different countries, and of course different backgrounds, whether they're Muslim. Culturally, are we really that rich in terms of product to get this diversification that we're talking about? Well,
everything starts from step one. I think in terms of whether we are cooperative, yes, we are. We are definitely cooperative. If you look at it, I mean, the GT board does not work alone. it works with other stakeholders like the Hotel Association, the Tourism and Travel Association of the Gambia. We also have the Grand Operators Association. Under the informal sector as well, also we work with them, the car market vendors, there is a federation. You have the Tourist Taxi Drivers Federation. We all come together and decide what we want to do, and we try to make sure that we meet those objectives that we want to achieve.
Pierce, the Gambia is small, really, but why can't we compete with the likes of Maldives?
If you look at it, we do have a chunk from the market that all those other countries are competing from. So we are competing.
So what's our comparative advantage? What's the competitive advantage here?
Gambia, I would say, as he said, the people.
Yeah.
The friendly nature of our people, the cultural diversity that we have to offer as a country, as well as the proximity. I think, these are all issues that make us stand out, proximity to Europe and, all these other destinations that attract quite a number that add to the arrival numbers that we have as a country.
The Director General of the GTHI will be here to talk to us about the people, in fact, and just how they're going about that. But he made mention of investment, which is very important. And that makes me want to ask how you're working with especially the private sectors, notably GAIPA, in just making sure that the required and necessary investment is generated to improve the existing up-country tourism product.
We're working closely. If you look at the Gambia Tourism Board Governing Council, GAIPA actually sits on that governing board. Okay. So everything that Gambia Tourism Board does, GAIPA is in the picture of it. So we do cooperate with them. We have also created a conducive environment for the investments. The NDP clearly states out this as a strategy, and I think this government also is working tirelessly to ensure that investors continue to have confidence in Gambia and to ensure that whatever they invest will yield benefits for them. And also, attract others to come in for further development and economic activity.
But what's been your impression so far thereafter? Have you been seeing the required investment from the private sector?
Of course, we have had a lot of investment.
Do we know who our biggest investors are?
Of course, they're here.
Yes, we do.
Tell us. Go ahead. Yeah, the board works directly with those people.
You have the Tamala.
Yes.
You have the Tamala group.
Okay.
Tamala group, which have about more than 3 hotels. They have Kalimba. They have Balafong. They have the Jalibas. They're even about to invest on Cook's Club Hotel, but because of COVID, they could not materialize. Also, we have the Senegambia group, which also owns the African Princess Hotel, the Seneg Sunset Hotel, and other small facilities like restaurants.
Now, going down to the regions, where we're actually looking back to refocus the attention. Is the much needed investment going into that part?
Well, yes, there were a lot of promises, and there were hopes. Even we have one of the hoteliers who has even invested a hotel in Farafenye. Be rest assured, it's because of the situation of COVID that some of those things changed, but there were a lot of hopes for people to invest in upcountry. In fact, if we go down to Kudang, there is pretty much a new facility coming up by a Gambian, and it has some good standards. So Gambians are really inclined to invest upcountry, especially after when the minister and the team went round to showcase, to visit the areas, the hinterland.
I mean, you mentioned how you're working with some of these private investors as well. Just how are you supporting them in just marketing as well? Because most of them are really doing their marketing on their own. Is the GT board really involved in this process?
Sure. Under our regulation, they should do their own marketing. However, we support them by showcasing whatever they have in our websites, even also in our TV programs. If you know, I'm sure you're aware of our expedition programs. We have been going around to all the facilities, owners and properties, to make sure that they showcase whatever they have. So we are definitely doing a lot of things for them.
And your reach has been enough? Your reach in terms of audience?
Certainly, as per our pocket, I think it's enough. I just understand what we mean by pocket.
Interesting, but then would in fact come back to that later on as well. But before I let you go, Director here, I mean, the ecotourism is a very vital component, appears, and maybe Director can come later in this. Are you aware of the challenges facing marine habitats that could really further destroy the beautiful scenery along the River Gambia as well, and just how you're going about the effective management of the biodiversity resources, of course, in line or in collaboration with other relevant ministries that are dealing directly with this, because it calls for effective coordination amongst all the different ministers involved. And of course, you are promoting the River Gambia in every product that you're trying to sell in this industry. And without the beautiful scenery, really, there's nothing to promote, would you say?
Certainly. We are aware of what climate change has done to our environment, Gambia and even internationally. The Ministry of Energy, the Ministry of Environment, works closely with the Ministry of Tourism and Culture, especially with the Gambia Tourism Board. They have a committee that they set up that actually deals with such erosion, beach erosion, as well as other really climate negative impact sort of challenges that the country is facing. And there is a lot going on. Obviously, we cannot solve the problem overnight, but we are conscious of the fact that ecotourism actually has a huge market out there. And ecotourism travelers are usually high spenders. And as a country, I think this is a market that we're looking to explore and to ensure that we attract. So that being the case, we cannot be seen to really allow our environment to be degraded. So reforestation is fundamental. And the fact that our beaches also are eroding, we are ensuring that the Ministry of Environment works on projects that would eventually ensure that all of these negative impacts of climate change are actually addressed. Very well.
I mean, Director, I'm sure you would have another impression on this as well, because investment is also needed in just boosting the ecotourism that we're about to look at. How's that coming along? Has it been really, adapted well?
Sure. I think if you follow in events, I think the Ministry and the Gambia Tourism are taking the lead in trying to see how best we could have ecologists in all the regions. And we've started work on that. And that has also motivated us to even do centralized tourism by making sure that tourism reaches every doorstep of every Gambian.
Has it reached every doorstep?
Well, we are trying. As we speak now, we have a tourism representative in all the regions. We've deployed staff to go and help people in the community to see how best they can develop ecotourism, how they can develop cultural tourism, how can they develop nature-based tourism, and together with all the other technical departments. And I think the governors have also embraced that, and they have put them as part of their technical committees within their regions, and they're working very well.
How hopeful can we be of something concrete coming out of all of that negotiations and communication process in a very short term?
No, well, in fact, it is by default. If you look at the advent of COVID has taught us a lesson that we really need to focus on domestic tourism, and that is what they are definitely focusing on. Apart from domestic tourism, we are also looking at regional tourism, whereby we could also invite other nationals within the region, like Senegalese, Nigerians, Ghanaians, to also come and enjoy.
I'll tell you that some of the hotels you mentioned earlier, this is where they're getting the much needed revenue.
We are aware, and we are intensifying our marketing in that regard, especially through e-marketing.
Interesting there, but still, PS is here with the Director General of the Gambia Tourism Board. But before we go on this break, I just want to put the questions we've been receiving here on social media to the PS, and of course it's important that we have the Director General of GT Board here, as some of these questions kind of relate to what they're doing at their level. And the first one here we have is from the Gambia Environmental Alliance. I'm sure hearing them, you would know exactly what they're concerned about. And they're asking, is there any resilient plan for her ministry toward protecting and preserving our cultural sites and beaches from climate crisis?
There is, as I had mentioned earlier, it is a continual process. There is a committee that works on this at the level of the National Environment Agency under the Ministry of Environment. So there is that sort of strategy that the ministry has, because it's to do with environmental matters and not really tourism per se. Because yes, it's tourism because we also derive our products from, of course, the ecosystem when it comes to ecotourism, etc. But then the Ministry of Environment is spearheading this initiative, and tourism is definitely not left behind.
Hassan will further dilate on that. But another one is how ambitious is our ministry to mitigate the issue of coastal pollution? And of course, Director, the issue of beach littering as well. How is that really coming up?
Well, it's something that is a bit dicey, and we have been taking a lot of measures. However, it all boils down to attitude. Like, for instance, when you talk about the Sunday beach, when we wanted to put in certain measures, there have been a lot of complaints about people saying that we don't want Gambians to go and enjoy on the beach. However, of course, it is our interest for Gambians to go and enjoy what we call domestic tourism, to enjoy their own beaches. But however, when they go there, some of them tend to litter the beach, and which is also not helping.
But should that be a deterrent?
No, it's not a deterrent. So we try to see how best we can continue sensitizing them, and even put some billboards, some boards, sort of, to tell them that there should not be any littering, there should not be driving on the beach, there should not be waste dumping on the beach. So we are trying to do a lot of things, a lot of those strategies to make sure that at least people are sensitized about the damages it's going to cause when it comes in terms of littering the beach, also dumping waste on the beach.
But do we have enough bins on the beach to make sure that some of these things...
Well, we may not have enough bins, but there are bins.
Could that be the reason why some are littering?
No. I mean, I think it just has to do with people can see even a bin, and instead of dropping in the bin, they'll go and drop it somewhere else. But I also will agree with you that we need to do more sensitizing, as well as put in more bins.
So do you have plans of doing that in a very short term, by next year to say?
Well, we are doing our best. As soon as we get the required funding, the required resources, we should be able to do that, honestly.
Yes. That was the Director General there of the Gambia Tourism Board, Mr. Abubakar S. Kamara. Here, of course, talking to us with the Permanent Secretary, Madam Kodu El Jabang Senghor. With that, we go on a short break, and when we come back, Mr. Hassum Sise, the Director General of the National Center for Arts and Culture, will also join us for other discussions. Stay. Welcome back to the OGI. My name is Fatu Eli Kamiloshi, and today we are having the Ministry of Tourism and Culture, and the Permanent Secretary, Madam Kodo, is already here with us, previously joined by the Director General of GT Board, and now joined by the Director General of the National Center for Arts and Culture, Mr. Hassum Sise. Hassum, you're welcome to the OGI.
Thank you very much.
Very well. You know, before we went on the break, we were talking about the facelift that is much needed for the restoration of our heritage sites, especially even those UNESCO inscribed. And the PS has highlighted that, you know, improvement has been done in terms of the allocation of resources. To be precise, the budget has been upscaled. What do you make of this?
Well, yes, I fully agree with the Permanent Secretary. And I want to start by, really saluting the tremendous support that we get from the ministry. The development budget has been disbursed, regularly since 2018, basically to refurbish our heritage sites.
How much are we talking of here that has been injected in this?
In 2018, 2019, like $3 million were disbursed.
Has that been enough? Or is it, in fact, enough for this process?
In fact, it's never enough.
Right.
Yeah, never. And really, it can never be enough. But it was an excellent start for a process that is very, very important. when you got the funding, for example, we rehabilitated some of our UNESCO World Heritage sites.
Which one?
Namely the Stone Circle site at Wasu, and Kerbach. You have hundreds of Stone Circle sites, across the country. But for ease of, we just wanted to be wise with resources, so we just concentrate on Wasu and on Kerbach.
I was going to ask, what about the islands and the museums we have on them?
Well, I'm coming to that.
Okay.
What we did was we refurbished the museum at Kerbach, to add value to the site. So now when you come to Kerbach, you see the stones, see the museums, and there are facilities also for visitors. At Wasu too, we've done the same thing. We have the Kankurang, center in Georgetown that also has been rehabilitated. We've, brought in power, to, make visitors more comfortable. And also at Fort Bullen also, we did some tremendous work there to rehabilitate.
Fort Bullen?
Yes, in Barra, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site also. I know you are itching to ask about the island.
Of course.
James Island.
James Island.
In there also, there are two aspects to the island. The island itself, which is, severely eroded because of global warming. Well, we are not losing the island.
Okay.
It's threatened, but there's a lot of effort being made, not only with the help of the ministry, but also with the help of development partners, like the U.S. embassies, like Ambassadors Fund for Cultural, development. We've applied. And there are 4 stages that you have to cross before you get the money. We have, we have crossed the first stage, the second stage.
Okay.
We are now stuck at the start stage.
And how much is this money that you are about to reap once you
It's in the tens of millions of dollars. Yes, I don't have it offhand.
Okay.
But we did a very, very thorough budget, with the help of engineers, like structural engineers, like civil engineers. So we've got a very good budget. But we are now, stuck at the 3rd stage of this, very, very long process.
That would be.
But the embassy is very supportive and of us in this, regard. No, but we don't just look at the island. We also look at the communities around the island. And I had to mention this because when you have a UNESCO World Heritage Site, UNESCO is very, very particular about the well-being, about the integrity of the site, but also how is the community around the site.
I was going to put that to you.
And that's why we have done a lot of work at Dufure Albreda, the information center, the NCAC work with the Gambia Tourism Board and the ministry, to add value to, the whole destination there. We've trained tour guides, certified from the community, about 12 of them, fully, engaged. We have, engaged the community in skills training, like soap making, like batik, to enable them make, souvenirs. We have replicated the same thing at Fort Bullen, training of guides, which is still ongoing, and also at the Wasu Stone Circle side, using, training used from the locality to train them to interpret the site. So by doing that, we increase our community outreach, and we also make the site more relevant to the community because they can earn their living, from interpreting or from selling, souvenirs.
That said, this whole process that has started already, is it really generating income as expected, income that can be reinvested back into the sector and boost other areas?
According to International Council of Museums, and UNESCO, you don't generate profit, so to speak, from heritage. What you do, you generate income to plow back into the heritage, for conservation, for upkeep, for interpretation and for community, outreach activities.
Have you been doing that?
Well, yes. For example, if you look at the, work that we have been doing at the Fort Bullen, for example, for the first time, youths and women from the community have come to see that the heritage can have a positive impact on their lives. We trained 15 youths. And this we did with the support of the Tourism Board, and of course, with our foreign partners. The idea was, you have seen this fort here, for the past, 212 years. What are you able to make from this fort? As to earn a living. So the guides, we train them, so that when visitors come, you see, when you cross with your, tourists, as a guide from Senegambia, you come to the fort, you hand over to these guys, and they earn a living. That's why, in fact, the structure, the ecologue being built there, there's a specific office that will be allocated to the tour guides.
Very well. Yes, let me just shift back to you. Very interesting points there by Hassan. But talk to us about, I will come back to you, about the private museums and how the development of regulatory framework, right, for private museums is going about, which is expected to ensure that arts and culture, collections comply with the regulatory guidelines.
If I repeat that, I wanted the PS permission to answer that question.
Yes, because I was directing it to her because this is also, incorporated in the NDP, and it's important that the PS is
well, she asked me to work on that, and I have some latest information.
Okay, maybe you can then, when you can
well, yes,
back PS.
the issue of private museums, and galleries is very, very important. It's in the NCAC Act. Because like every sector, culture and like arts and culture, it also has this private sector like angle to it. We cannot, government, all the museums cannot be like public museums. So we encourage people to have private museums. And please, you have to know there are differences.
I was going to ask why are
no,
these
now I'm talking heritage lingo now.
All right,
heritage, jargon. You have public museum, private museum, village museum, community museums.
Village museum.
Well, yes.
Okay.
So, and in all those, categories of museums, we encourage people. For example, Kachikali in Bakau. So it's a private museum. The Bojang family. To add value to the Kachikali site. Like in Tanje, that's a village museum. Basically, confined to interpreting just a small segment, of a particular culture. Now, community museums, Gunjur, for example. Just as we speak, there are efforts, at the community level to build a museum in Koina. They've come, for technical support and advice and so on.
Gunjur is being developed lately, no?
Oh, well, yes, because it's a very, very important.
With the mosque.
Yes, the mosque. I'm happy you mentioned that, but PS will talk about the mosque. So all what these regulations are meant to do is to make sure that these museums don't operate in a legal vacuum. Okay, so we work with them, develop the regulations. Like things like operating hours, like minimum staff. Okay. Like minimum standards. My colleague from GT board was just talking about standards. Museums and heritage sites too. We have standards, like visitor, conveniences. Like interpretation. Guides. And so on.
So has the framework been developed already?
At the level of the NCAC, yes. So now the stage we are moving in is really to roll out this framework to the various stakeholders.
That has not been done yet.
No. And then they will have their input, and then we go to the ministry, for them to take care of the last.
When do you expect to do that? When do you expect to?
India.
This year?
Yes, because the legal framework is very important for private museums, yes.
Now that NCAC has the resources in nurturing our culture, and sellable product in this industry, Entertainment Incorporated, tell us, has a framework to exporting such product been developed as promised in the National Development Plan?
Well, yes, our artists are, exporting. They're exporting,
services,
yes.
Is the copyright law, in fact, effective? Because it's important collecting royalties.
It's very effective. In fact, one, good thing that the increment in the budgetary allocation has enabled us to do is to operationalize the Copyright Office. Because the Copyright Act was there, but there was no money to establish the office. Now we have done that. For the past, 2.5 years, it's operating, they are registering works. The Collecting Society of the Gambia, which is to collect royalties, have just gone to Congress. You are aware of that. And in fact, in the coming weeks, we want to take them to the ministry to pay a courtesy call. And also now to appeal to government to give them seed money so that they will start collecting money from radio stations and broadcasters like you to pay the artists for the songs that you have been playing for the past 60 years of radio broadcasting in the Gambia without paying a single royalty. So we are working, we are going to work with the ministry on that so that, the Copyright Collecting Society will be giving seed money, by the National Assembly so that our artists will stand to art, earn royalties.
Very well.
And also to come to that, like some artists were given diplomatic passports, 2 years ago, to facilitate their movement outside this country to export Gambian cultural services.
But some of them still get rejected.
Well, this visa conundrum, Fatu, you know it more than I do. I mean, it's a conundrum. This visa issue is a conundrum, inside a puzzle.
Interesting. But Hassan, it's been great having you talk to us. And at this point, we'll of course invite the Director General of the Gambia Tourism and Hospitality Institute, Mr. Nyang, to also join us here and talk to us about some very interesting things happening at that institution. Rather, and Mr. Nyang, you are also welcome.
Thank you for having me, Fatu, here.
Very well. I mean, the outlook for tourism by 2020, going by the NDP, seems to be an expectation of doubling figures, right, from 2016. From GDP, expectation double almost. Tourist arrivals doubles from 2016. That's the expectation. Employment, foreign exchange, in all of these areas. And it cannot go really without the much needed, standards requirement that we've been talking about from the beginning. And the GTHI is at a crucial, point in making sure that that in fact is attainable. And I know that the NDP is quite, conscious about the development of this particular institution to make sure that we're able to meet the required standards. Tell us, how is that coming along as the DG?
Yeah, thank you, Fatu. I think that he's coming along very well. Because our targets for the NDP was to improve the quality service delivery, as well as expand tourism to the rural area, to the regions. From 2018 to 20, we've trained 120 youths in Central River Region and LRR and NBR. And this is like a part of a process to actually cover all the regions. But when COVID hit, we were delayed a little bit. But the good news is from September, we're going to roll out other programs in URR and in West Coast region. And this is mainly focusing on tourism hospitality skills. But in addition to that, before we conduct any training, we do an assessment and to see where the gaps are, what is needed. So in addition to the hospitality skills, we're also rolling out programs on bakery in these respective regions as well.
Interesting. And tell us, so far, how have you been able to gauge the improvement in terms of the human resources that you're producing from the institution? How is that coming along from 2016 onwards?
Yeah, it has been coming along very well because, we do have our own research and consultants unit. We do our own surveys. We will also hear from the stakeholders, from tourists, and it's not perfect. Service is a work in progress all the time. We need to improve. Because it's a dynamic industry.
What would be the areas that you need much improvement if they are supposed to?
The areas we need more improvement is in the area of pastry and bakery. Simply because it's capital intensive, you need a lot of equipment. It's not just training people, but you really need to have the right equipment. Saying that though, government has been really nice to us by, increasing our subvention by threefold. And this has actually allowed us to really go into the regions. And because of this increment in the subvention too, we used to train 200 on campus, but now we're training 400. And, Mr. Cisse talked about the development fund. For the past 3 years, we've been receiving that. And thanks to that, too, we're about to inaugurate a bakery center at the campus here that is going to focus solely on bakery and pastry.
So, from your perspective, you would say, from what you're receiving from the government and what you're doing at your level, your progress has been very much rapid.
Indeed. But however, TVET is expensive. What we're receiving from government can only cover 40% of our budget.
Is it?
So the 60% we have to make ourselves.
Are you making that?
Well, we are trying.
How much are you making out of the 60%?
I would say over 40%. But you know, we need more investment in Tibet. I think our peers has been talking about it, and if the finance minister is listening, please give us more money, you know, to train the youths of this country. And more interesting, what we're training is not just youths here. We're also training returnees that are coming from Europe, America, from the back ways, and this is another important aspect of our training. Is inclusive, and is also trying to reach out all the regions.
Interesting. Yes, you mentioned that they're contributing about 40% to the 60% that is expected to come from them. Would you say so?
I would say so. I mean, this is an institution that has, with so little time, in terms of the budgetary support that they've been given, have been able to really innovate on looking at new ways of doing things in terms of training these youth that come to their campus. The tourism sector is quite dynamic, and what we're lucky to have is we have very young, talented individuals in that institution who are ready to be very flexible in terms of how they train, in terms of using technology, which is fundamental. For the first time, the institution has a library and an e-library for that matter.
Indeed.
This has never existed. Okay. So within this short period of time, they've been able to establish an e-library. They have also ensured that, infrastructurally, they have improved the visibility of their campus, making more attractive to people that come in. As he had also mentioned, they have also established a pastry and bread making sort of factory, I would call it.
Yes.
Center.
Which is important as well.
Which is very important.
Yeah, but I'm glad that you mentioned technology, really, because it's also one of the areas that is needed to be improved in this sector, just so you're able to get the expected goal. And just tell us generally, with your work with all the other relevant departments, how much investment has really gone into that, in just intensifying your output using the technology?
For the very first time, I think all of them, all the Director Generals here with us, have recognized the importance of using e-platforms. And in the case of the National Center for Arts and Culture, for the first time also they have an e-marketing platform. For the first time also they have actually engaged and employed a marketing sort of officer who will be in charge of marketing these heritage sites that we have online and on the ground as well. And for GT Board, of course, they have been doing this in the past, but they have also refocused their sort of strategy as to ensuring that they use IT technology as much.
Very. And Director, I'm sure you're aware of the important role this plays in that sector.
We are, and we're probably the only institution that can safely say that our programs were not affected with COVID, simply because our IT manager, and I will not do justice if I don't mention his name, Mr. Marong, he had the foresight. 4 years ago, he used to come to my office saying, we need an app, we need to have an e-learning platform. I'm like, what for? 80% of our delivery is practical. Why do you need an e-learning? But he has really proved us right, and he went on, and we supported him. He worked on the e-platform, and we now have our own GTHI app, which can be accessed through Play Store or Apple stores, and that has really helped, for us to meet the contact hours we needed to do. Like all our programs finished on time because we actually divided the classes in 2 groups, and part of the other delivery contact hours, it was actually done online. So it's like from September, the next batch, students can access all the material and through their phones, through the app stores or Play stores. And this is all thanks to the vision the IT manager had and the support of the management. And of course, Mr. Cisse talked about the COVID fund. We also benefited from that and bought laptops and internet access to all our instructors, which makes it easy, really, for the use of the app and the digital platform you mentioned earlier.
Nice. P.S., in talking about doubling figures, of course, we all know what happened, you know, from 2019 down towards 2020. But in just talking about these doubling figures, a clear roadmap is very much important in setting that. What would you say, you know, it's what is determining your roadmap in realizing these goals?
Well, it's very clear. Our roadmap is basically anchored on the National Development Plan, and it clearly states out our aspirations as a sector. And it also clearly states out what our strategies are, what our activities should be in achieving those strategies. So basically, this is what we have. This is the document that we're using, and it has yielded a lot of benefits for us as a sector personally. We have seen a lot of improvement in the way that we have been doing things, and we have also recorded achievable results that are on record for everyone to see.
And your work plans are pretty much going on as expected?
Going on as expected.
Would you say so as well, Director, from your end?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. I think we have gone past the work plan really, because for us now, you know, we're thinking about our next strategic plan.
Okay.
You know, whatever that was laid out for us to achieve in the NDP, we have met those. And I also have to mention here our partnership with the International Trade Center, because they've been very supportive through the YEP project.
With the tech effect?
Or
is it a different one?
Yeah, I think it's a tech effect, but you know, they've been really supporting in going into the regions in training on camp.
Very well. Before I let you go, since we're still talking about professionalism in this industry, P.S., I'm sure maybe you are aware of a European TV station in one of their popular TV series, you know, referring to the Gambia as a hotspot for sex tourism. What's your argument to this? And what would you say is how the ministry is just making sure that the laws guiding the operation of hotels and all the required institutions necessary in this ecosystem are going about sticking to the required rules inscribed in these different laws that we have against what could be sex tourism?
That is one thing we would not accept as a country. We are not a sex hub. That is very clear. I think our cultural values and the religions that we follow as a country would not even permit us to accept that. So we, as a sector, have ensured that we really bring culprits to book, and the GT board has been doing a lot in terms of ensuring that whoever is suspected to be on the beaches or anywhere within the vicinity of the TBA with children that are underage is actually cautioned and even taken to the nearest police station.
So would you say it's really a thing in the country?
Well, it's everywhere. Wherever there is tourism, be it Gambia, be it Europe, be it the Americas, you would expect such to happen. But what is most important is the ability of a government to ensure that it's not something that continues openly. And I would have to, of course, commend the Gambia Tourism Board for ensuring that the TSA, the TSU, the Tourism Security Unit on the TDA are consistently on patrol. And most importantly also, we have a 24-hour tribunal which actually ensures that whoever is caught, be it a traveler, a visitor, or a local, peddling these children, underage children within the TDA or within hotels that some of them take them, are actually tried and also convicted and taken to jail or fined.
Very well. It's been interesting, and I'm quite sure if the Director General from GT Board was here, could have dilated more on the Sex Tourism Offences Act we have. But I'm also aware of the fact that we have policies in this, and they're making sure that they're very much available in all the different hotels and various outlets where tourists, of course, converge. The most important thing now is just how we make sure that these laws are effective and very much robust in curbing some of these menaces. But P.S., I'm afraid we've run completely out of time. Just to let you give your final words in just 20 seconds, what we expect in the very short term, especially what could be the outcome of this year's tourist season.
Thank you very much. I think I would close by thanking His Excellency the President for the support he continues to give the tourism sector and the confidence he also gives us in delivering as required by the NDP. I would also take this opportunity to thank the Honorable Minister, Honorable Ahmad Nkeba, for his indefatigable leadership role that he continues to steer the affairs of this industry with us behind him. Fatu, I think we are still uncertain as to how the outlook of this coming season would be. But nonetheless, we have to be on the guard. We have to be as ready as if it's normal, although it's an abnormal situation we find ourselves in. Most importantly, I think what I would urge Gambians or even non-Gambians living in this country is to vaccinate, to get vaccinated. This is fundamental, especially for us as tourism players. We need to get people vaccinated so that the confidence is built for the destination, so that foreigners could also have confidence in visiting our destination. That is very fundamental. Secondly, the issue of domestic tourism. I think we have mentioned it. Most countries that came out of this pandemic and made instant revenues were those countries that actually domesticated their tourism products. So they were very much quick to open up within their countries, and people started traveling, and the sites came back to normal, accommodations were built, so the revenue was generated. So as a country, we have also learned that we have to make sure that we invest in the infrastructure of country to build on this NDP target of domesticating tourism, as well as creating opportunities for those communities that are up country.
So we can be hopeful for the coming years.
We would be hopeful, but as I had mentioned earlier, I think generally it's agreed that nothing would come back to normal until anytime, say 2023. But with that, we still have to manage, people have to continue to survive, and work has to go on.
Very well. Indeed, work has to go on, and it's very much interesting to know that you're really doing what you can to meet the NDP targets as well. But Pierce, would like to thank you and all the other directors that joined us today on this show for being a part of us today. This was all we had time for on this edition of the Open Governance Initiative. My name is Fatu Ali Kamaloshi, and we were looking at the Ministry of Tourism and Culture on today's edition. Till we come your way again next week with another ministry, enjoy the rest of our program.